I'm speaking to Melanie Franklin, Chief Executive of Maven Training. Melanie, can you tell us what would be the trigger for the implementation of a projects and program management structure within an organisation?
I think what I'm seeing at the moment with a lot of our clients is that project management is moving away from this is the approach I use to manage a particular project. For organisations at senior management level, at board level, realising that there's so much project management activity going on within the organisation that if they don't take a hand in structuring the framework by which that work is done, they're not managing the inherent risks across the business. So I think many organisations have reached a tipping point where there are so many projects that they feel they need to get a grip on this at the organisational level. That isn't to imply that individual project managers can't be trusted, but it is too important to the business overall that this work should be allowed to be run as an individual sees fit. Better to have a structural approach for the whole organisation.
Would that structure need to be implemented just because of the sheer number of projects, or would there be other issues involved?
Well, I think the sheer number of projects is about the amount of change that an organisation is undertaking at any one time. And so much change can very much destabilise an organisation. So I think first and foremost, that structure helps plan when things are going to have to change, when new processes are going to have to come about, when we're going to have to restructure a particular team, where we might have to relocate a group of people because of what's happening on a particular project. Individual projects can plan those activities and get agreement operationally to do those things. But if you've got a lot of other competing projects trying to make changes in the same operational area at the same time, there has to be an overarching structure to control that. Because otherwise, the organisation is so busy changing itself that it is not servicing its client base.
Yeah. What are the steps actually involved in putting a more formal structure in place?
Well, I think one of the first things I tend to ask clients is this just about risk management, or are they actually trying to look at perhaps a more effective use of time and materials? Because one of the initial steps is looking at perhaps a return on investment. Should we have a hurdle rate by which we actually identify which projects get the green light and which do not? Because I think that can change the structure of what you're actually looking for in project management. But very much the first step has to be senior management engagement. I think good project practice and the adoption of best practice, as we've seen in the last 5 or 10 years with the growth of Prince 2, has come bottom up. But when it comes to implementing a structure across the organisation, it cannot filter bottom up, it has to come top down.
So that implies quite a lot of changes for organisation, doesn't it? So what are the challenges in institutions set such a structure?
I think one of the classic issues where best practice in perhaps the realms of Prince 2 or managing successful programmes has been really helpful is that choosing your approach. Now, I've had a lot of experience years ago, before Prince 2 was the sort of commonly implemented project structure, where there were pockets within the organisation that did project management, and therefore we would adopt their approach, their framework. But then it was always seen as theirs and not the organisations as a whole. Yeah. So I think the first question has to be, what is going to be our framework? And I think implementing best practice with all the lessons learned from all sorts of other organisations, which is where these best practice approaches have come from, can be really helpful in getting that adoption across the organisation.
There's going to be other problems to address, aren't there? Budget constraints, perhaps timeframes, things need to be done in. How can they be addressed?
I think start small. I think the first thing is let's agree our structure, and I think get people involved who are real movers and shakers in their ability to persuade others. So they have an ability to get across the message that this structure is helpful, that it is going to ensure that we know what we're doing on any piece of work that comes our way, that we're actually looking at a cost-effective approach, and therefore it's good for the organisation as a whole. And I think you have to win hearts and minds before you start going down the route of, oh, and this is what we're going to do, and these are who we're going to train, and this is who's going to adopt it. So I think there has to be quite a lead time in terms of getting people on board, inspiring, enthusing people and saying, this is actually going to be helpful, and making that link back to, so this will make our organisation a better place to work, we will be more effective, we'll get our products to market quicker. So I think those arguments have to be won first and foremost.
So what can an organisation like Maven do to help in that process?
I think one of the things we have been known for is that we provide training courses, but we've always said that that's only part of the story. And I think because our trainers are so experienced in actually running projects and programs or sponsoring projects and programs, we have a lot of advice to give. So I think we're very comfortable helping organisations take those initial steps in trying to identify what's right for them and how to get that momentum, that enthusiasm going. For us, the structure of actually making it happen, define the approach, train people in the approach and help embed the approach with constant coaching and mentoring after the training events is our bread and butter. It's what we do. But I think we are here for the wider conversation.
Does it make a difference to your approach on what size of organisation you're dealing with?
I really don't think that size is too much of an issue. Whether you're a very large company, if you have that management commitment and you decide to pilot your approach and roll it out incrementally across projects and programs, that can be very effective. A smaller organisation that perhaps has very tight control because there aren't that many people in the conversation can roll things out perhaps automatically without having to pilot things. Both approaches work very well, but for me the differentiator always comes down to management commitment and engagement. Commitment is not just signing off, we should do this, but the engagement is, and then talking to people about why we should do it and getting them enthused in doing it.
We're talking about implementing a program or a project management structure. What is the difference between program and project management?
I think the simplest definition that works very well for managers in an organisation who often don't really care if they're not a project manager and they're not a program manager and they're actually trying to manage the business, they're not really worried about the terms. But for me, the simplest definition is to say that a program is a collection of multiple interdependent projects. They should be grouped together as a program of work because all of the pieces taken together will deliver what you're looking for, and that they're not an individual set of projects that where a project can be run standalone, and if another project doesn't run successfully it will harm it in some way. So we have to look at standalone projects versus grouping them together as a program. There's a lot of terminology around program management. We talk about having a vision for the program. We talk about the program delivering something of strategic importance. And I think there is a recognition that if you're going to bother grouping all of these projects together, they in some way rely on each other, it's because they are creating something that's quite big, quite sizable for the organisation, and that usually is of strategic importance. And it's not just technical delivery. Sometimes programs can be about changing the culture of an organisation. There are lots of projects that taken together will lead us to that over a period of time. So again, programs can usually be quite lengthy, the basic calculation being that of course they are as long as it takes to go from the start of the very first project to the end of the very last project. But the other thing to point out is that they're not just about the projects. The projects lead to additional change activities, and both the project and those change activities are included in the programme plan. The reason I think that senior managers are very interested in programme management at the moment is because it's housing both of those activities together under one person's responsibility, so that projects don't deliver something that is never used, and that there aren't multiple changes made to an organisation that somebody isn't overseeing and making sure that they're not tripping over each other. And for me, in very practical terms, that's what I'm seeing boards of directors excited about, is that there's that governance of their organisation.